Shalom. I'm Gladys, and today I will be reading 1 Samuel chapter 25 through 27 of the Tree of Life version. Then Samuel died, and all Israel gathered and lamented him, and buried him at his house in Ramah. David then arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was so wealthy he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. At that time he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man, a Calebite, was harsh and evil in his dealings. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David dispatched 10 young men and said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel, and when you reach Nabal, greet him in my name. Thus you will say, 'Long life, and shalom to you, shalom to your house, and shalom to all that is yours. Now I hear that you have shearers. When your shepherds were with us, when we did them no harm, and nothing of theirs was missing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let the young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. So please give to your servants, to your sons David, whatever you find at hand.' David's young men went and told Nabal all the words in David's name, and waited. But Nabal answered David's servants by saying, 'Who is David? And who is Jesse's son? Nowadays there are many slaves, each running away from his master. So should I take my bread, my water, and my meat that I have cooked for my shearers, and give it to men whom I don't know where they come from?' So David's young men turned around and went back. When they came and reported to him all these words, David said to his men, 'Everyone buckle on your sword.' So each man buckled on his sword, and David also buckled on his sword. About 400 men went up following David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. But one of the young men told Nabal's wife Abigail, saying, 'Look, David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, but he spurned them. Yet the men were very good to us. We were not harmed, nor were we missing anything as long as we went about with them while we were in the fields. They were a wall to us both by night and by day, all the time that we were with them tending the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what you will do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household. But he is such a worthless fellow that no one can speak to him.' Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves, 2 bottles of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 measures of roasted corn, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and put them on donkeys. Then she said to her young men, 'Go on ahead of me. See, I am coming after you.' But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she was riding on the donkey and going down by the hidden pass of the mountain, behold, David and his men were coming down towards her. So she met them. Now David had been saying, 'Surely in vain I've guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missing of all that belonged to him. Yet he has returned me evil for good. May God do so, and even more to David's enemies, if by the morning I leave even one male of all who belong to him.' When Abigail saw David, she quickly dismounted from her donkey, fell before David on her face, and bowed down on the ground. As she fell at his feet, she pleaded, 'On me, only me, my lord, be the punishment. But please, let your maidservant speak in your ears, and listen to the words of your maidservants. Please, my lord, pay no attention to this worthless fellow Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and disgraceful folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. So now, my lord, as Adonai lives, and as your soul lives, since Adonai has restrained you from shedding blood, and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now therefore let your enemies and those who are seeking to harm my lord be as Nabal. Now let this blessing which your maidservant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who are accompanying my lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for Adonai will certainly make an enduring house for my lord, because my lord is fighting the battles of Adonai. So let no wrongdoing be found in you all your days. If anyone rises to pursue you and seek your life, then let my lord's life be bound up in the bundle of the living, with Adonai your God. But let the soul of your enemies be hurled away as from the hollow of a sling. So when Adonai has fulfilled for my Lord all the good things that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, then this will not be a stumbling block for you, or offense of heart to my Lord, or needless bloodshed by my Lord avenging himself. So when Adonai had dealt graciously with my Lord, then remember your handmaid. Then David said to Abigail, Blessed be Adonai, God of Israel, who sent you to meet me this day. Blessed be your discernment, and may you be blessed for keeping me this day from shedding blood, from avenging myself with my own hand. Yet as Adonai, God of Israel, lives, who restrained me from harming you, unless you had come quickly to me, surely not one male of Nabal's line would have been left alive by the morning light. So David received from her hand what she had brought him, and said to her, Go up in shalom to your house. Look, I have listened to your plea and have granted your request. Then Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was holding a banquet in his house like that of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was quite drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. It came to pass in the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, and his wife told him these things, that his heart died within him, and that he was paralyzed like a stone. About 10 days later, Adonai struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be Adonai, who took the case of my insult from the hand of Nabal, yet has restrained his servant from evil. Adonai has returned Nabal's vileness on his own head. Then David sent word and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they told her, David has sent us to you to take you as his wife. So she rose, bowed down with her face to the ground, and said, Behold, your handmaid is a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. Then Abigail rose quickly and mounted a donkey, with 5 of her maidens following her, following David's messengers, and she became his wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and the 2 of them were his wives. Meanwhile, Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish, who was of Galim. Now the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Isn't David hiding on the hill of Hachilah with faces Jeshimon? So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to search for David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped in the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon by the road. But David was staying in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul had come after him into the wilderness. So David sent out the spies and realized that Saul had already arrived. Then David got up and went to the place where Saul had camped. David detected the spot where Saul lay asleep, as well as Abner, son of Ner, his army commander. Saul was lying inside the barricade, and the troops were camped around him. Then David spoke and asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Joab, brother of Abishai, son of Zeruiah, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp? I will go down with you, Abishai answered. So David and Abishai approached the troops by night. Behold, Saul was lying asleep within the barricade, with his spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the troops were sleeping around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand today. Now let me pin him to the ground with a single thrust of the spear. I will not have to strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, Don't destroy him, for who can lay his hand on Adonai's anointed and be guiltless? David added, As Adonai lives, either Adonai will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down to battle and be swept away. Adonai forbid that I should lay my hand on Adonai's anointed. Now, just take the spear that is at his head and the water jar, and let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug from beside Saul's head. They got away, and no one saw, or knew it, or woke up, for all were asleep, for a deep sleep from Adonai had fallen upon them. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood up on top of a distant hill with a wide space between them. David shouted to the troops and to Abner, son of Ner, saying, Aren't you going to answer, Abner? Then Abner answered, saying, Who are you? Who called out to the king? Aren't you a man? David said to Abner. Indeed, who is like you in Israel? So why didn't you guard your lord the king? For one of the troops came in to kill the king your lord. This thing that you have done is no good. As Adonai lives, all of you deserve to die, because you have not kept watching over your lord, Adonai's anointed. So now, look around. Where are the king's spear and the water jar that were at his head? Saul then recognized David's voice and said, Is this your voice, David, my son? It is my voice, my lord the king, David said, then added, Yet why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? Now please, let my lord the king listen to the words of his servant. If Adonai has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if men have done so, then cursed are they before Adonai, because they have now driven me out, that I would not cling to Adonai's inheritance, saying, Go worship other gods. So now, let not my blood fall to the ground away from the presence of Adonai. For the king of Israel come out to search for but a single flea, just as one hunts for a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul replied, I have sinned. Return, David, my son, for I will no longer do you harm, since my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and erred so seriously. David then answered and said, There is the king's spear. Let one of the young men cross over and take it. Adonai will repay everyone his righteousness and his faithfulness. For Adonai gave you into my hand today, but I refuse to lay my hand on Adonai's anointed. See, just as your life was highly valued in my eyes today, so let my life be highly valued in Adonai's eyes, and may he deliver me from all trouble. Then Saul said to David, Blessed are you, David my son. You will both do mightily and will surely prevail. So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. Then David said in his heart, One day I'll be swept away by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than to escape immediately to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me in all the territories of Israel, so I'll escape from his hand. So David rose and crossed over, he and the 600 men that were with him, to Achish, son of Maach, king of Gath. David stayed with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household. And David was with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. So when Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, If now I have found favor in your eyes, let me be given a place in one of the country towns, so I may live there. Why should your servant stay in the royal city with you? So Achish granted him Ziklag that day. Thus Ziklag came to belong to the kings of Judah to this day. The number of days that David stayed in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Melekites, for those were inhabitants of the region from ancient times, as you go all the way from Sur and as far as the land of Egypt. David attacked the region and was leaving not a man or woman alive, and took away sheep, oxen, donkeys, camels, and clothing. When he returned and came to Achish, Achish would ask, "Where have you raided today?" So David would reply, "Against the Negev of Judah, against the Negev of Jerahmeelite, and against the Negev of Kenites." David left no man or woman alive to bring to Gath, thinking, "Unless they should tell us about us," saying, "So did David." So was his practice all the time he stayed in the country of the Philistines. Then Achish trusted David, saying, "He has certainly made himself abhorrent to his people Israel. Therefore, he will be my vassal forever."